Potential tropical cyclone number 19 has formed. That's the first step to getting Hurricane Sara, and you will not believe the amount of rain it could bring. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back here at Meteo Mundo. We're your home for Caribbean weather, and it's nice to see you on a late Wednesday. Friends, we now have potential tropical cyclone number 19, the first advisory from the National Hurricane Center. That means we have our first track. So coming up, we'll take a look at what's going to be happening with PTC 19 in the short term, forecast to quickly become a tropical storm, and then we'll see how this evolves as we go over the weekend and into early next week. So we'll talk about the short-term forecast, the big impacts expected for this area, and where the storm could go and how strong it could be after that. You know, I'd love to hear from my Meteo Mundo weather community. Let me know in the comments section below where you're viewing from, what the weather has been like. Let's get into it. So again, potential tropical cyclone number 19. It's a mouthful. Basically, the Hurricane Center makes it PTC when they feel like a storm is going to develop, but it hasn't yet. But it's going to impact land within 48 hours. So now we get a cone, now we get watches and warnings because we have PTC 19. Moving to the west, very slowly, winds right now are 30 miles an hour. There is still an elongated, somewhat disorganized, low-level center, but the mid-level circulation of the storm is getting much better. You can see there's a big blow-up of thunderstorms on the western side, and this storm is going to consolidate in a hurry. There's high sea surface temperatures, virtually no wind shear. In the short term, we're going to get some rain trying to spread back over places like Jamaica, even southeast Cuba, the western sides of Haiti, and portions of the Cayman Islands. But down the road, beginning tomorrow, it's all about how this is going to impact portions of Central America in the short term. Now, you look at this first track, and you see it kind of a lot of plot points right here off the northern coastline of Honduras, and then it moves off north and west. That's not even linear. Here's what I mean by that. This plot point is Thursday, tomorrow. This is Friday. This is Saturday as the storm tries to get tugged back to the east, then eventually back over the same area on Sunday, and then finally beginning to pick up some forward speed to the north and to the west on Monday. That's what it looks like from the Hurricane Center's perspective. Again, find the Thursday afternoon plot point. It's right in the middle of all these other ones on the northern coastline of Honduras. Friday is east. Saturday is farther east. Sunday is back to the same area, and then Monday eventually back into northern Belize or the Yucatan. Now, the first intensity from the Hurricane Center has this remaining a tropical storm, but the Hurricane Center highlights that they have no confidence, basically, in the strength of this storm because it will matter greatly whether the center of circulation stays offshore or moves inland over Honduras or other areas of the Yucatan as well. And that cone of uncertainty, again, some of that is offshore. So in the short term right now, we have a hurricane watch. The area is in orange from the Puerto Castillas area of the northern coastline of Honduras to the Nicaraguan border, and then from there south towards the Puerto Cabeza there along the coastline of Nicaragua. That is a tropical storm watch. So tropical storm and or hurricane conditions are likely. Friends, the biggest concern I have for this area right now is the amount of rain that could fall because this storm is going to be sitting in virtually the same spot for potentially up to 3 days in a row. The amount of rainfall that the Hurricane Center put in their first advisory is absolutely mind-boggling. And you can see the storm already beginning to move in with a few showers and storms developing in northern Honduras towards Guanaja and Roatan just off the coastline. Speaking of Guanaja, I got this video today from Henry Urbina. He told me, he goes, Rusty, I've never seen the water this high. And I said, well, Henry, how long have you lived on the island? He said, all of my life. And I want to be clear that the tide cycle to be this high and the water levels this high already, the storm has really yet to approach, and it's going to get a lot stronger, and there's going to be a lot more rain. That is very concerning indeed. Henry, I appreciate you sending in that video. If you would like to send me a picture or video, either the areas impacted by Sara or across our entire viewing area, myMediaMundo@gmail.com is the easiest way to do it. So it's going to be about the rain in the short term. Really, Sara is going to be about two parts. The first part is the impacts it's going to bring to this area, which is becoming clearer on this late Wednesday. And then what might happen if the storm survives and gets into the Gulf of Mexico and the impacts it could bring to Florida and portions of the Bahamas. There's a lot of uncertainty with that, and even more uncertainty than what we had yesterday. But let's first talk about the short term and the rain. So I'm going to bring up the GFS model here, and I'm going to throw up the rain associated with this. And I'm just going to take this out a few days because that's all we basically need to do here to talk about the impacts for Central America and the Yucatan. Again, you'll notice on the GFS model here that just like the Hurricane Center, this storm is not going to move much over late Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and even into Sunday, okay? As a matter of fact, you don't really see a lot of movement with it at all. Now, it is a weaker storm on the GFS relative to yesterday, but still does make it a weak hurricane. And even the Hurricane Center has this as a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm for 3 days in a row. So we're teetering on hurricane strength from the Hurricane Center, and they say if the center stays offshore, more than likely we would get a hurricane off of the coastline of Honduras. But look how this rain doesn't move over days and days and days. And friends, the Hurricane Center's first advisory has 10 to 20 inches of rain in northern Honduras and locally up to 30 inches of rain. That is potentially up to 750 millimeters of rain falling in a 3 to 4 day time frame in this area. And there is some higher terrain in northern Honduras as well. So catastrophic and life-threatening landslides and mudslides to go along with flash flooding are all a big concern. I am really concerned about this. I've been doing this for a while, and easily this is a top 5 flood concern that I've seen out of any landfalling system or a system that's going to be sitting over an area for an elongated period of time. If you live in northern Honduras or coastal areas, and even Guatemala and Belize, you really need to pay attention to this storm. It's going to start to bring this rain tomorrow morning, and then it's just going to rain constantly through at least Sunday. Please check in with your local government and your local officials, but you need to start preparing right now for what could be catastrophic and life-threatening flooding coming to your area. Again, even if this stays as a high-end tropical storm, the winds would be, of course, 60, 70 miles an hour rather than hurricane strength, but the rainfall associated with this could be astronomical. Now, some of this heavier rain could backbuild into portions of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and especially the Cayman Islands. The GFS actually has a lot of rain for you, but eventually this storm will pull up to the north and to the west. Again, in the short term, the reason why it's not moving is there's this trough coming off the United States East Coast. It's almost trying to tug Sara to come back with it. It's saying, look, I'm influencing you, come back with me. But it's not strong enough. It's too far away. It holds Sara in the same spot, which is horrible for these areas, and then eventually releases its grip, and that's why Sara can continue a northwest journey. So again, the big impacts for the short term is the amount of rain. There's going to be wind impacts as well, especially along the immediate coastline. But look at this. And again, this is directly from the National Hurricane Center's first advisory. Okay, I'm not just pulling numbers from anywhere. 10 to 20 inches of rain, 250 to 500 millimeters, up to 30 inches of rain, 750 millimeters possible in northern Honduras. Life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides, especially near the Sierra La Esperanza area of northern Honduras. Sierra is just the Spanish word for mountain, so you're talking about La Esperanza Mountain. You're talking about other higher terrain areas and mountainous areas of northern Honduras that could have some catastrophic flooding and life-threatening landslides and mudslides. And oh, by the way, coastal areas, including Roatán, Guanaja, the other coastal islands, and the northern coastline of Honduras, a 1 to 3 foot storm surge too, to go along with all of that rain. For Guatemala, Belize, and Nicaragua, it's 5 to 10 inches of rain. That's still very significant, up to 250 millimeters, and then isolated areas even up to 15 inches at 750 millimeters. Then we'll see some of that heavier rain trying to move into Quintana Roo as we get into late Sunday and Monday. Friends, I appreciate you guys. Real quickly, thank you for taking a quick second and hitting the like button. Thank you for subscribing to Meteo Mundo. You want these tropical updates and your daily forecasts across the Caribbean and the Bahamas. Please share this with anyone who you think might need this information. It's a very serious situation developing in the spots that I just mentioned. So thank you for sharing this with those who you think might need to hear what is going to be happening with Sara. But again, in the short term, it really is all about the amount of rain could fall. Now look, there's going to be some wind impacts as well, but to top off the rainfall potential here, we'll go back over to the GFS model. This is just over a 5-day period. Now this is probably the extent of time that this is going to impact these areas. Again, on this particular product, the highest I can show you over this time frame is 14 inches, and we basically pinged the highest we can across all of northern Honduras. Guanaja, Roatan, even portions of Guatemala. So look, down the road, coastal Guatemala, coastal Belize, even portions of inland Belize. 5 to 10 inches is the forecast right now. The GFS is picking up on that, right? We'll get some heavier rain, especially to the southern sides of the Yucatan. It should be lighter amounts north and west towards Cancun and Merida, and simply because there should be a little bit more forward speed. The storm should be moving faster when it gets into the northern sides of the Yucatan. But again, on the GFS model, you've still got some very heavy rainfall, maybe a half foot of rain for portions of Grand Cayman, close to Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. Towards Jamaica, we could be seeing 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of rain in some parts of the island. Very wet forecast here. So there'll be a lot of rain pulled east, especially over the weekend, as that trough tries to kind of drag Sara back towards the east. If we're looking real quickly at the winds associated with this, again, still staying on the GFS model, and then we're going to get into the longer range forecast. But just to show you the winds out of this on the GFS, and the reason why the Hurricane Center has a lot of uncertainty, and so do I, as to the ultimate strength of Sara, it's because most of the models have the center truly hugging the coastline. The GFS tries to make it a hurricane briefly, but then pulls the eye back over land, and then it weakens back into a tropical storm. Some of the models keep the eye offshore, and I'll show you those, and they make it a Category 2 hurricane at least, and others keep Sara over land through Honduras and the Yucatan, have it as a weaker tropical storm, and some of them even try and basically fizzle out the storm before it can even get into the south central Gulf of Mexico. So again, a storm in 2 parts. We know the rain and wind will impact this area through the weekend, but what happens after that, how it evolves, is much more of a bigger question. So let's get back over to the GFS model and now look at the longer range here. Now again, the GFS yesterday, and I'll take this out until Wednesday, and we'll look at how this could impact Florida and the Bahamas. The GFS yesterday had the center of circulation staying offshore, had it basically splitting off of the Yucatan coastline, western Cuba, up the Yucatan Passage, and becoming a major hurricane. The GFS model today is much more in line with the European model yesterday and what the European model shows today, and that has the core of the storm going over the Yucatan, which translates into a weaker storm down the road in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. It still has to get pulled east because you do have this cold front coming in out of the southern plains in this trough, and that's going to shove it east, but it almost is a hybrid system, if anything, on the GFS, where we may not truly get a tropical center to reform once it moves north of the Cancun area, and it might just be a big sprawling area of rain and wind to impact Florida and the Bahamas and the Florida Keys as we get into our Wednesday. That's plausible, right? And it's all going to be very dependent on if that center stays offshore and just how strong it moves into the Yucatan and whether it can hold that low-level center. But for as bad as this is here, and could be very bad with the rain, I will say that it's looking at least a little bit better for Florida and the Bahamas based on the models I'm seeing today. Now, you're going to see a couple that are still quite strong, and this bears paying attention to and a lot of watching because, again, it's so dependent on the center staying offshore. On the GFS ensemble tracks, the black mean line is, again, over northeast Honduras and then over the Yucatan, okay? There's still a lot of tracks that keep it offshore. Those are the red lines, and as you would imagine, they're the stronger storms. They're the ones with the lower pressure in red. The farther west that you go, those are the weaker storms because there's more land interaction, and it's as simple as that. And I can't tell you where it's going right now, friends. We're splitting hairs here. We know it's going to be generally tracking north and west, but we'll see, first of all, whether it stays off the Honduras coastline, and then secondly, whether it stays off the Yucatan coastline. The tropical models and their intensities, notice there's a quick ramp up in the 48-hour time frame. So between now and Friday, we get ourselves a hurricane on some of the models. then some of them dip it back down to tropical storm strength or weaker. Those are the ones that have it interacting with Honduras and or the Yucatan. Some of the models that keep it offshore keep it as a category 1 or 2 as we get into early next week, and then that would be more of a concern for especially South Florida, the Florida Keys, and the Bahamas. On the European model, okay, look at just sitting in the same spot the GFS had it. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, up to 72 hours with virtually no movement. Then it gets kicked north and west over northern Belize and the Yucatan. It does hold together better than the GFS, where we would have a tropical storm at least coming back into West Florida. It's farther north. I'm not sure how plausible that is to get that far north in latitude before it's shoved off to the east, but if it does take this big bow, it's a possibility. But again, in the short term, sitting over northern Honduras, the Western Caribbean in general, right? And then trying to re-strengthen a bit into the Gulf of Mexico, all right? The ICON model, which was inland and weaker yesterday, is about the same scenario. I'm showing you the rain because, again, you see, for 3 days in a row, it just sits in about the same spot. It's going to be a big problem. Very, very concerned about the amount of rain there. Then it's a much weaker system like the GFS coming back off of the Yucatan, okay? And again, those three are all showing this having interaction with the Yucatan as we get into Sunday and Monday. We do have, now that we have an INVEST, now we have PTC-19, our high-resolution hurricane models running. We'll start with the HWRF model. If you look, the HWRF model keeps the core of the storm just offshore. It might be just 25 or 50 miles, but if you look in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and again, we'll start to loop it up again here, you get a tropical storm by tomorrow, you actually get a hurricane by Friday, and then a Category 2 hurricane as we get into late Saturday and early on Sunday with winds of 100 miles an hour. That's the razor-thin margin we're talking about, friends, right? If the HWRF solution holds true, the core of Sara is offshore, high sea surface temperatures, no wind shear, it gets to be a Category 2 by Sunday, right? Now, these high-resolution hurricane models don't go as far out in time, so we don't see what's happening with this as it progresses north and west as of yet, but we'll be looking at that coming up down the road. On the latest run of the HAFS A, this is much more in line with the GFS, meaning that the core or the center, the low center of Sara, goes back over Honduras. Now it strengthens into a hurricane right here, then sneaks into northern Honduras with all of that rain, and then basically skirts the coastline into Guatemala and Belize, remaining a tropical storm. One more look, the bottom right-hand side of your screen, your maximum sustained winds, not gusts. So there's that brief touch to 74 of a hurricane, then back over land, and then staying a tropical storm late weekend and into Monday as well. Again, that's the razor-thin margin we're talking about to how this could evolve in the longer term. So on alert, especially Honduras, for the amount of rain. Again, please start preparing now for that. Check in with your local government, your local officials for things that you might need to do. Guatemala as well, and Belize, 5 to 10 inches, 15 locally in some spots. The Yucatan down the road as well. For paying attention, meaning areas that just need to keep monitoring how Sara evolves: Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Cuba, South Florida and the Florida Keys, and the northern and the central Bahamas. I would put the northern sides of Nicaragua on the pay attention list as well. I think it's really kind of the far northeast side of Nicaragua that could get some very heavy rain, but those are the areas on the tropical storm watch. So on alert, these areas, continue to monitor and pay attention these spots right now. The European rainfall totals, all right? You saw that track. Remember, the Hurricane Center's first advisory said up to 30 inches of rain. On this map from the European, if you look at the bottom right, the highest over the next 7 days on this map is 38.85 inches of rain, and unfortunately, it is over northern Honduras. So the European model even has more than 30 inches of rain falling. I hope this is not the case, but when we're talking about a very strong tropical system sitting over the same spot for potentially up to 3 days in a row, we have to start talking about these kinds of rainfall totals are not implausible, meaning that they're plausible, they could happen, okay? European model then, of course, pulls the storm to the north over the short term. Now, if we're going to get the storm to impact Florida, it would be just beyond this into late Wednesday and Thursday. So that's why you don't see a lot of rain for the peninsula and the Bahamas as of yet. Scattered showers for portions of the greater Antilles, and then a little bit more rain for portions of Leeward in the Windward Islands and the Lesser Antilles in general. All right. Let's get into that part of the forecast. All right. And again, I'm going to keep an eye on Sara, throughout the entire thing. But obviously, you can tell from my tone, I'm very concerned in the short term with the amount of rain. And again, it may not just end up being Honduras, guys. It could easily be other areas of Central America, the Yucatan, even Jamaica, and even portions of the Cayman Islands as well. Again, you can see this moisture feeding back into Jamaica and the Cayman Islands as we speak. Southeast Cuba could see some showers and storms out of it. Same thing for Haiti. Now, overall, we still have this feature to the north of the Greater Antilles and the Lesser Antilles that will bring in some rain to the Dominican Republic and Haiti and the Turks and the Caicos. We're going to get some scattered showers here over Puerto Rico, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. It's not going to be as concentrated. There's going to be scattered rain in this area the next few days. The biggest impacts I see are actually sea conditions. There's a lot of big time swells here right now in the Eastern Caribbean, so watch out. We have a lot of high surf advisories. We have a lot of small craft advisories and just swell advisories in general for a lot of this part of our area. And we still have our near gale conditions for most of the Bahamas on the eastern side. When we look at the rain in this area over the next couple of days, so just kind of touching on some spots that we haven't looked at that aren't going to be directly impacted by Sara. Over the next few days for the Lesser Antilles, Antigua and Barbuda and Anguilla and south to Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, and everywhere in between, friends, it's going to be more scattered than anything. Still could be some locally heavier downpours, but I do expect improving rain conditions beginning early next week. So you'll see as we turn into next week, beginning on the 18th, we'll start to see more moisture come back into play, especially by next Tuesday and Wednesday. Scattered rain will continue for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands in the short term. A little bit better chance for rain for the Dominican Republic and especially Haiti. Now, again, the GFS here, if I stop this and I kind of come back, you can see the influence of that trough coming in. And watch this moisture from Sara try to get pulled back into it. So heavier rain over the Cayman Islands and Jamaica. And that, again, would be on Saturday. So take a look at these areas here as we get into Friday, Jamaica Saturday, and even into Sunday. That's why we could get 3 to 6 plus inches of rain in a couple of those spots. And again, ultimately down the road for Florida and South Florida and the Bahamas, we'll have to see how this plays out. A lot more uncertainty right now overall in the evolution of Sara once it moves through the Yucatan. If we look real quickly at the winds associated with the storm as well, and again, it's just unbelievable to look at basically 3+ days of plot points, and you're talking about 100+ miles of movement, and it's going back and forth. But again, you can see that spin up briefly right there. But just to highlight that this trough coming off the east coast of the United States, watch the wind energy with that. That's what's trying to tug Sara back to the north and to the east. It never fully can. It loses its grip. But then on the GFS model, watch this cold front and trough associated with that pick up the storm. It's going to be moving a lot faster as it gets into Florida, but this would be certainly not a completely tropical system coming into Florida on Wednesday based on the latest run of the GFS. A lot of uncertainty in the long-term forecast. Friends, I appreciate you guys. You can follow us across all social media, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. You want to send me a picture or video like Henry did today, it's mymediamundo@gmail.com. As always, you have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to drop it in the comments section below while you're down there. Thank you again so much for liking and subscribing to the channel. Friends, you have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'm back tomorrow with all the latest. Until then, you take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon right here at Meteor Mundo.